Hi, everyone. So poor Joseph. The last time we spoke about him, he had been betrayed by his brothers. He had been almost murdered. He had been sold as a slave for 20 pieces of silver and is on his way to a faraway land where they don't speak the same language as he does and they don't worship God. And he was only 17 years old. Joseph didn't even know if he would ever get to see his beloved father again. Well, Joseph was on his way, and you know what? It probably seemed hopeless. But there was good news about that. You see, Joseph, he had been brought up, in a very rich family, and he had a richly ornamented robe given to him by his father, and he was very loved and he was favored. And now he had nothing. He had lost everything, and he's on his way to be a slave. But Joseph did have something still. And that is he trusted God. He knew God and he believed in God. And so God was with Joseph even far away in Egypt. Well, Joseph went to Egypt, and the king of Egypt, he was called Pharaoh. And one of Pharaoh's officials, he was actually the captain of the guard. His name was Potiphar, and he bought Joseph. And so Joseph went and worked in Potiphar's home. And Potiphar noticed something about Joseph. He noticed that Joseph was different, that everything Joseph did succeeded. And that was because God was with Joseph. And so he watched, and so he kept giving Joseph more and more responsibility. And soon he made Joseph head over his whole house and over everything that he owned. In fact, the Bible says that Potiphar didn't worry about anything. He left everything in Joseph's care, and all Potiphar worried about was what he was going to have for breakfast, what he was going to have for lunch, and what he was going to have for supper. That was it. So everything was going great. Joseph was a busy guy. He was, probably a very important young man in that household, and all because he trusted God. But then something sad happened. Potiphar's wife, she wanted Joseph to do something that was wrong. It was against what God said, and Joseph said no. But she bothered him day after day after day after day, and all the time Joseph said no, no, no. Until finally she got so frustrated and so angry that he wouldn't do what she wanted that she made up a horrible lie. And she went to Potiphar and she told him the lie, and Potiphar believed her. And he became so angry with Joseph that he threw Joseph into prison. So this koala bear, he's going to be my Joseph for today. So Joseph got thrown into prison. Poor Joseph. He hadn't done anything wrong. And someone lied about him, and he ended up in jail just when things had started going good for him again. But Joseph still trusted in God, even while in jail. And while he was in jail, the head of the jail, the warden, he noticed something about Joseph. He noticed that everything Joseph did succeeded because God was with him. And so he started giving Joseph more and more responsibility. In fact, he made Joseph the head over all of the prisoners. And it got to the point where the warden, he just gave control and care of everything over to Joseph, and he didn't worry about anything the same way Potiphar had done, all because he saw that everything Joseph did turned out great. Well, time passed, and there were two men, and they worked for Pharaoh. And Pharaoh got very angry at them, and he threw them into jail. One of them was a baker. So my duckie's going to be the baker. So he was the chief baker, and his job was to oversee all of the cakes and the buns and the rolls and all those baked goods that went to the king's table to be eaten. So he got thrown in jail. Poor guy. There he is. All right. And then there was the chief wine taster. And the chief wine taster, it was his job to bring the cup of wine to the king, and then he would taste it to make sure there was no poison in it before the king drank it. So his was an important job as well. But he got thrown in jail. He got in trouble. Well, there we go. They went to jail, and they were put under Joseph's care. Well, one night, those two men had dreams, and each dream had its own meaning. Well, when they woke up, they were very disturbed and they were trying to understand what it could have meant. And they were thinking and they were kind of sad. And so Joseph came to check on them and he saw that they were in distress and he said, "What's wrong?" And they said, "Oh, we've each had a dream, but we don't know what it means. And there's no one here to interpret it for us." Well, Joseph said, "Well, where does interpretation come from except from God? Just tell me your dream." Does that sound like anyone else to you? It sounds like Daniel, doesn't it? Well, that's what Joseph said. And so the first one to speak was the wine bearer. And he said, "I had this dream, and there was this vine that had 3 branches. 1, 2, 3. And all of a sudden, the vine, it budded, and then it blossomed, and then it grew grapes, and then the grapes ripened. And so all of a sudden, they're all ripe, and then I had the king's cup in my hand. And I took those grapes, and I squeezed them into the king's cup." I squeezed them into the king's cup, and then I gave the king the wine. Well, Joseph looked at the chief cupbearer, and he said, "That's a great dream. It's great news because those 3 branches, they mean 3 days. And in 3 days, you are going to get your job back as the cupbearer to the king." Well, that was pretty good. So, then Joseph said, but wait, when you go back to the king, please, can you not forget about me? Can you remember me to the king and say, and tell him what's happened? He said, "I'm a Hebrew and I was kidnapped and I was taken here by force. And even now in this jail, I have done nothing wrong to deserve being put in prison. Please talk to Pharaoh for me and ask him to release me from this prison." Well, the chief baker heard this and he thought, that was a pretty good outcome. So I'm going to tell Joseph my dream. And so he said, "This was my dream." He said, "I had this dream that I was out and I had 3 baskets on my head. 1, 2, 3. And in the top basket were all kinds of really yummy breads and yummy things like that. Hopefully this will stay. And he said they were all for the king's table. The only problem was that the birds came and they kept eating and eating and eating those breads." Well, Joseph's face fell, and he looked at the baker and he said, "I'm sorry to tell you this. Those 3 baskets, they also equal 3 days. But your dream means that in 3 days, Pharaoh is going to have you executed. You're going to be killed." Well, 3 days later, it was Pharaoh's birthday, and he had a big celebration, a big feast for all of his officials. And there he reinstated the cupbearer. And he got to back to his old job, and he got to bear the cup. But the baker, he got sentenced to death, and he was taken away and killed. Now, the sad thing is that even though Joseph had said to the cupbearer, "Please don't forget me," he did. He forgot all about Joseph, and he didn't remember him. He didn't mention him to Pharaoh. So this is where we're leaving our story again this week. Poor Joseph. It looks hopeless again, his situation. He's in jail. He asked someone to help him. He helped them, and they forget about him. What's he going to do? Well, you know what Joseph's doing? He's still trusting in God because he knows that God is in control. See you next week.